This week on To the Contrary.
First, women appear to be on a primary winning streak. Will that hold till November? Then, campaign funds for childcare expenses. Behind the headlines, public support for the death penalty is waning, but some states still use it a lot. One woman is trying to change that in Arkansas.
Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, women candidates.
They're running and winning. As primary season continues, so does the pattern of Democratic voters giving women the nod. This week, 4 women apparently have the chance to win House seats in Pennsylvania, breaking up the state's all-male congressional delegation. Last week in 4 states, women won 63% of congressional primaries. But with the number of women running this political season, they're actually losing at the same rate as they are winning. And many of the women who have won will face tough general election matchups. They're up against incumbents who win 80% of the time.
So, Atima, will 2018 turn out to be another year of the woman, or the year of disappointment for women?
I think the fact that we have a record number of women running, period, is still going to be something worth talking about.
I don't think it's going to be another year of the woman, because I think voters are starting to see past gender now, and I'm encouraged by that. And I wouldn't say it's disappointing on either side of the aisle. There are women choosing to run on both sides, perhaps not at the same number, but it's encouraging.
Lara?
I tend to think that it's positive that there are a lot of women running. It is true that most of them will lose, but I think there will still be substantial gains, and that is an advance in something important in our history.
I don't think it's the year of the woman, given the fierce competition they're going to have running against incumbents that win at such a wide margin. I think a lot of this is sort of actual resist. These women are out there trying to make a point, and they're making it.
Do you think that the blue wave is dying?
No, I think it's still something to contend with, but I sort of push back against, I feel like every 3 or 4 years we say, oh, it's the year of the woman, it's the year of woman. And as Rina said, I think we're sort of past that. I think that people know that they want good candidates, period.
Well, we're not past that in terms of, we're like 84th in the world in terms of women's representation in the country's equivalents of Congress.
Yeah.
So it just strikes me, and we just had the Me Too movement, which again may be fizzling, I don't know, but clearly women in this country don't think that they're equal yet, so why should they?
Well, I think you can't dismiss the fact that women make different choices. Some women just do not want to get into politics, the rough and tumble of politics, and they make different choices. So often we say women aren't represented, women aren't equal in this country, but women also have a lot of choices in this country, and they may just choose not to run for office.
I think that's the case, but I think that what's significant about it is that a lot of women came out of 16 and were like, oh, wait, if Donald Trump can run without any sort of political background or things, like a lot of them lost sort of that concern about whether I could be a good candidate or not.
It's also really important to understand how partisan this is. I mean, at some level, we're never going to reach parity until Republicans actually field candidates and have success with candidates in the same way that Democrats have, because that's really where kind of the loss is in terms of why we can't get to 50-50. Republican women need to get out there and step up more, and they need to have more support from the party.
But isn't the main reason why there's so many more Democratic women involved in politics running for office than Republican women not? Because of what Julie said. I think Republican women do want the choice, that are more likely than Democratic women, and of course this doesn't apply on the individual level. I'm talking as a generally speaking, they're going to want to raise their kids. They're not going to want to run for office.
Well, and I think to add on that, I think Republican women also, and I don't think this is exclusive to Republican women, but
No.
I think by and large Republican women feel like they don't need a woman in office to represent their needs. I think that the people that I vote for, if they're male, I vote on the issues. I don't sort of say, I live in a city where my mayor is a woman and she's consistently raised the taxes in my city, which is making it very difficult for my husband and I to make ends meet. So, in that case, it had nothing to do with the fact that she's a woman. I vote for the candidate, and I think a lot of Republican women do.
I was going to say, I could definitely agree that not every woman candidate is always going to be great on women's issues. If that was the case, I'd have been voting on Sarah Palin. I disagree where she stood on a lot of women's issues. But being that, I think that there is something to be said for the fact that you can look at states where women representation is higher and the focus on the economy, healthcare, childcare, things that affect families more so, increase when more women representation on both sides of the aisle.
But this gets to the point that women actually do what all other men do, which is they vote their party before they vote their gender. That is true down the line.
Don't they vote their religion?
Sides.
I'm seeing it more as they vote their religion more than their gender, because religion is what's driving
no, they vote
the
their party.
social wedge issues.
Well, I don't think that's really true. I mean, if you actually look, a huge number of the white Catholics in the Midwest who voted for Barack Obama in 2008 are actually a big part of who made up the winning coalition for Donald Trump. So they were not necessarily voting party in either side, and it wasn't a gender issue either. What was really going on was they were looking at issues that mattered to them. But I do think it's important to realize...
But 98% of Catholic women use birth control in their lifetime against church. So it depends on how faithful they are.
Well, but I think it's really important to understand that party does drive the vote more than any other characteristic that exists, period. I mean, if I know somebody's party, I will know their likelihood of voting for that party to the tune of about 95%.
Now, I think it does sometimes alter when you get down to the very local level and you have relationships with people. I know some, like Alexandria City race in Virginia, you have some folks who are Republicans who might be voting for the Democratic candidate and vice versa, just because of the relationships there. But when you start getting to federal and state elections, I think it's...
And this is why I would ask the Republican women to really look at, get women to run who agree with you on issues. I mean, I know that there are women like Sarah Chamberlain who is doing this with the Main Street Partnership, and she is out there recruiting women. I know there are new women's organizations.
There are lots of Republicans
that are
helping women run. You belong to several of them.
Yeah, and I helped launch a C3 recently that is helping center-right women come to office and political appointments as well, because this is an interesting time. We're seeing differences in demographic as well. There's a great survey out with Vote Run Lead and Bustle magazine. They've looked at how many more younger women, millennial women in particular, are becoming centrist, how many more are choosing to take independent instead of party. So historically, yes, we know that women are flocking to the parties, but the GOP hasn't played identity politics, and I think younger women are now starting to see something different for themselves.
Well, I will add, one thing that I think is a reason some Republican women don't get into politics and policy is because it's vicious, and Republican women are often...
Do you think that's any different for Democratic women?
Yes, I think that Republican women are often called a traitor to their sex. I mean, we see this all the time. We see attacks, unlike the Democrat women get, and we can pretend that doesn't happen. But you look at how Michelle Obama was treated in the White House compared to how Melania Trump is treated, compared to how many women. I mean, you have Kellyanne Conway, who is called horrible names on a morning show. You have Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is regularly ridiculed. Why in the world is a Republican? Some of the stay-at-home moms why would you get involved?
At least in
politics?
Kellyanne's case, because we helped to start her television career. She was pretty tough when she spoke.
But
when you're going to be tough to your interviewer, the interviewer is going to be really tough.
I'm not suggesting that she shouldn't be attacked on policy or on things like that, but we're talking physical descriptions of her and name calling. I'm not saying it doesn't happen on the other side, but I guarantee you, if we looked at some of the things that have happened to women in the Trump administration over the last couple months, it is unfair. And I think that is one of the reasons Republican women are not at all interested in getting involved.
I would actually agree with you, because I think some of the attacks that went on Sarah Palin and Michelle Bachmann were every bit as bad as some of the attacks that went to Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
And the truth is, this is about, I would argue, a culture that has a misogynistic vein that runs through it. And I think this is where women do need to start, moving beyond party and start sort of supporting each other. I want
to ask you, though, before we run out of time, would your advice to women running this season be to moderate, particularly to the liberal Democratic women who are running?
I do think the liberal Democratic women are appealing to the base, just as the conservative women who were successful in 2010 and 2014. I mean, I can think about Senator Joni Ernst. We're appealing to their Republican base. Midterm elections are uniquely more base elections than they are sort of crossover. So these Democratic women are probably doing the right thing. But I do say frequently that when we get to parity is when I'm going to get picky. And I really mean that at some level we have to get beyond party if we're going to get to 50-50.
All right. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter @BonnieOrbay or @ToTheContrary. Now to women candidates and childcare.
Liuba Gretchen Shirley is among the record number of women running for office. She's also a mother of 2 toddlers. Last month, she petitioned the Federal Election Commission for permission to use campaign funds to pay for childcare. Last week, her petition was approved unanimously, making history. In the 70s and 80s, Americans told pollsters that when women with young children worked outside the home, they were stunting the child's development. Now Americans overwhelmingly support working women, but were stymied unpaid family leave. A recent Pew survey found Americans are torn about government's role. Only half of people overall and 1/3 of Republicans think Congress should mandate leave versus continuing to let employers decide. 69% of Democrats support a government mandate. We're also divided about how to pay for it. We disagree over who should pay. The most popular idea is a tax credit to employers who offer leave. This plan is strongly or somewhat supported by 87% of Americans. Next is pre-tax savings accounts for employees to save for leave, supported by 84%. But to date, Congress has only approved 12 weeks of unpaid leave for working parents.
So should this be a big issue for the women, Republican and Democratic, who are running for office this year?
Absolutely. All around. Paid parental leave and all the issues that come with running for office, such as needing money for childcare. These are very, very important issues to take us into really a new frontier in American politics, because children are, of course, we know, sort of the bedrock of our society, and how we raise them up will sort of dictate how we're seen as a modern society. And I think that these are really good steps. Over a decade ago, I was on Capitol Hill as a staffer, and I remember former Congressman Jim McCreary of Louisiana was using some monies. He'd made a petition to use some monies for babysitting services because he and his wife were out on the trail. And I remember just thinking that was so normal and
natural.
And he was
turned down?
No, he got that. He got approval to do that. And I think that was had he not, I would have been outraged, because it's like, this is normal. This is a part of what you're entering into. Somebody needs to take care of these children. And it is a valid expense, I think. And especially from the Republican side. Strengthening the American family, paid parental leave is going to, if we don't make serious changes to our policies at all levels, really, and encourage companies to give their employees paid parental leave, creating incentives.
Well, why not? Why wasn't there a tax break for this in the tax reform that the president passed and Congress signed?
My personal opinion is that it was very hurried and rushed, and there hasn't been a serious discussion, at least that I've seen, take place at the federal level about how to really make it better for employers to offer paid parental leave.
Your thought?
I was just going to say that I think this is an amazing achievement that we finally actually have been able to accomplish it. I think it would allow younger families, especially those who don't have careers that are so financially successful that they can, just dole out to a nanny and not, miss that dollar, and allow more younger families of a more diverse economic background to get more involved in politics.
Talk about IWF's plan.
I'm so glad, and I would contradict one point. I think the White House and the federal government has been very interested in this issue. I know Ivanka Trump has made this a priority, and the White House has had several meetings, and some members of the Senate, namely Joni Ernst and some others, have really been interested in taking up this issue. IWF's plan, I think, is very innovative, and I think it's really gotten some amazing.
Briefly.
Yes. Well, essentially, it's allowing people to dip into their own Social Security savings for an amount of time, and then
use it for childcare.
They can use it for childcare, and then down the road when they retire, they just have to work that same amount of weeks that they took off. So it's a trade-off, and I think women are willing to make those trade-offs in order to get the money they need.
That still doesn't compete with, European countries that give a year of paid leave.
Well, let's not forget, in European countries, this narrative is always brought back to the fore, and I think we need to remember that women are twice as likely as American women are twice as likely as European women to get into middle management and higher executive positions. And part of it is because of those mandated, very, very generous leave policies, which really put women at a disadvantage. We might want to act like employers aren't like, she's childbearing age, but I think there is some worry on the part of some European companies that if they give these women these promotions, it might cost the company.
Lara, if women candidates push these issues, do they get more votes, or is there a backlash saying, that's all she cares about?
Well, I think it really depends on how you're doing it. Again, right, this goes to the ideology of the parties. If you're looking at sort of a federal government mandate, you're going to be appealing to a Democratic audience that favors that. If you're looking for something like this Social Security sort of offset for, paying for your unpaid leave from your employer, then you're really talking to more Republicans. But I do think there actually was a rider that was put into the tax reform bill by Senator Deborah Fisher to, in fact, incentivize companies to do more paid leave. I could be wrong about that, but my understanding is some of that tax incentive did actually pass. But I think, there is wide consensus across the aisle that paid family leave needs to be a policy. So the real fight is how. And I think this is where having a lot of women actually in politics can make a difference, because women can have these conversations about how do we get this done, and how do we get it done in a way that works for everyone, even across the party aisle.
And won't it be lovely when men are talking about it as much as women are talking about it? Behind the headlines, Ferranda Brasfield has spent most of her career standing up for voices that may not otherwise be heard. She currently serves as the executive director of the Arkansas Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, a group that addresses a pressing topic following Arkansas's recent history with capital punishment.
Arkansas chose to first schedule 8 executions in the matter of 10 days and then carry out 4 executions. One of the reasons is, and the reason that was publicized the most, is that the midazolam was going to expire. We really needed to use these drugs because they were going to expire at the end of the month, so let's go ahead and kill them. It's pretty much what the governor and the attorney general of the state of Arkansas said to the Arkansas public.
Despite the fact support for the death penalty in Arkansas is trending down, the state went ahead with the executions. Brasfield said Arkansans are still up in arms about these events.
We don't think that the state of Arkansas, or any state for that matter, should be in the business of killing its citizens. There are so many reasons that the practice of capital punishment is bad policy. All of the states that have done studies, I think it's 13 states, and the federal government have all come to the same conclusion that it costs more to attempt to execute your citizens than giving them the sentence of life without parole.
Brasfield believes, in addition to what she sees as the cruel nature of the death penalty, there are more reasons to abandon it, such as an unjust distribution of capital punishment. She says 25% of capital crimes are committed by people with serious mental illness.
We are currently working on an exception to the death penalty for those that are suffering from serious mental illness at the time that they commit those crimes. This is definitely not a get out of jail free card, but it is us saying as a society that for those with serious mental illness, the sentence of death is not an option.
Another group the death penalty impacts more than others is African Americans. They're sentenced to death twice as often as their white counterparts. She believes that life without parole should be the only available sentencing for capital crimes.
For a lot of African Americans in the state of Arkansas, if you're on death row or if you're charged with the capital crime, the color of your skin could mean life or death for you.
There are several reasons why public opinion is shifting on the death penalty, which has shifted several times in U.S. history. The main reason changing minds these days is the advent of DNA evidence.
DNA evidence has been one of the strongest factors to change minds about the death penalty, I think. We haven't had an actual exoneration here in the state of Arkansas, but or a DNA exoneration at all, but we do have Damian Eccles, who was on death row for almost 20 years. There have been 158 individuals throughout the country that have been exonerated from death row. They were totally innocent, and they spent an extreme number of years on death row for something that they did not do.
Arkansas is among 31 U.S. states where the death penalty is still legal. Even against those daunting odds, Ms. Brasfield believes she will prevail.
I most certainly see the death penalty being abolished, not only in the state of Arkansas, but throughout the country in my lifetime. I think that there will be a solid case that goes to the Supreme Court, and I think that it will be decided on Eighth Amendment grounds that the death penalty is cruel and unusual punishment.
And on that point, Lara Brown, as human history evolves, a lot of things that were seen as normal, slavery, beating children, even we're getting to this point now, being cruel to animals, is now seen by a majority of Americans as unacceptable. So what will be the thing that will turn the country on the death penalty?
Well, I mean, I think you also have to look at the dramatic reduction in violent crime as also being a contributing factor to this. I mean, if you look back in our history, when many of these states kind of reinstituted the death penalty, it was at the same time that we were passing the federal crime bill. There was a much tougher crackdown on laws generally. I mean, there was this sense of mandatory minimums. There was a fear about violent crime in our country, and a sense that there should be retribution. So is this going to
change public opinion?
I do think, I mean, it's important to realize that Democrats are really the ones driving the majority of the change around the death penalty, because Democrats are the ones who have moved away from being, in the sort of Clinton parlance, tough on crime, and in that 1990s mindset.
What about you? You think we're turning against the death?
I do, and I think part of the reason is the increased attention on the problems within our justice system, which you had a man in Missouri, I'm sorry I've forgotten his name, just released this week after spending 18 years in jail for a murder he didn't commit. And I think people are really starting to feel uneasy with the idea that we put people to death, and yet we have major problems with the justice system that really we don't have solutions to.
What role, if any, does the pro-life movement play?
That is certainly something that is very important to Catholics and the greater pro-life movement. And I think that there is, as you say, we're having sort of an enlightened moment. More people interested in animal rights, more people interested in the rights of Black Lives Matter, and these. It's made people, I hate to say woke, but it really has. And I think these are some of the other issues that people are now more concerned about.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that the trend toward criminal justice reform in this country, and really looking at what it means, especially with the death penalty, given its history, and really the reason it's really strong in the South, and where it's been in the South, is a tie to Jim Crow laws, and that's why it's targeted heavily African Americans and people who were put to death, who should not have been put to death. They did not commit those crimes, and there's the argument that obviously one person killed wrongly is just one too many, and there should be other ways for restorative justice that is not killing people, quite frankly.
There's increasing.
I've never been able to see why, at one point anyway, liberals were the opposite, but conservatives were pro-life at the beginning of life, but used to be more pro-death penalty. It always seemed like an inconsistency to me. Of course, the answer was, after you're born, it's, you have more control over your life. But still, I thought if you valued life, you would value it in all its forms, and that's changing.
And there's a great group called Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty that I've been happy to be involved with. Just this past week, Virginians Against the Death Penalty, another group that I'm involved with, is bringing awareness to these issues. And last year, we were pivotal in encouraging Governor Terry McAuliffe to get Ivan Telugu's, an inmate, off of death row in Virginia. And so I was proud to be a part of that. And I see in that group there are a lot of pro-life people because they really see it matching up. This is against our principles. The death penalty
one
is
of the few issues I feel like death penalty, criminal justice reform, it's becoming increasingly bipartisan.
Absolutely.
I don't agree with Rand Paul on just about daggone anything, except his opinions on criminal justice reform.
All right, that's terrific. See, we found a way to close the gap. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.